Hey, Originals listeners. I want to share a little backstory before we begin this episode. So, 8 years ago, I wrote a profile of today's guest, Ron White, for Men's Journal magazine. And here's how I pitched the story. Ron White is one of the most successful comedians on the planet. A guy who regularly lands on the Forbes list of highest paid comedians alongside your Jerry Seinfelds and Kevin Harts, but is all but totally ignored by the smarty pants New York writers who write about comedy. This I saw as a case of East Coast snobbery, mostly related to the fact that he'd gotten his big break as a member of the Blue Collar Comedy Tour alongside Jeff Foxworthy and Larry the Cable Guy. But White, I thought, was not only a singularly talented comedian and storyteller who hadn't gotten his due among the cognoscenti, he'd earned this amazing respect among his peers as one of those so-called comics. In fact, a few short years ago, Chris Rock actually put Ron's first special, They Call Me Tater Salad, on a short list of his all-time favorite comedy specials, a list that also included his favorite hours from Dave Chappelle, George Carlin, and Eddie Murphy. And I also saw Ron as a great men's magazine subject because of his reputation as a huge party animal. In fact, a good chunk of his act is devoted to his exploits while inebriated. Ron never appears on stage without a big crystal tumbler full of booze, and in the early days, a cigarette, which later became an expensive cigar. Here's just a small taste of what I'm talking about.
Other people learn things when I drink. Last night, a limo driver learned if I say I got a yak, it doesn't mean I have a long-haired buffalo living in my backyard. You know what a fair drunk driving test is? Drunk driving, get in the car, let's do a couple of blocks. Let me show you some skills. I'm not a 21-year-old puking cheap tequila through my nose. I'm a 61-year-old raging alcoholic, motherfucker. Or that's what it said in the deposition. When I was 17 years old, I was arrested for being drunk in public. Seemed to be a pattern. And one DWI, which was a bogus charge because it turns out they were stopping every vehicle traveling down that particular sidewalk. And that's profiling, I believe. I started this tour this summer in Las Vegas, and while I was in Vegas, I broke this tooth off at the gum line in an alcohol swimming pool related incident. I had a show to do in 4 hours. I was drunk and missing a tooth. It looked a little unprofessional. Not to me, but to the fine folks at the Mirage, it goddamn sure did. Now, I'm not saying I've never driven drunk, because I've drank so much in my life. Now on the back of my driver's license, there's a list of organs I need.
Given his act, how Ron actually ended up in comedy is pretty ironic. He grew up in a dusty North Texas nowheresville town called Fritch. Then, while serving in the Navy in the 70s, developed a pretty nasty heroin habit, which gave way to shooting speed. He landed in jail back in Texas for a drug-related offense, and his court-ordered treatment involved lecturing high school students and church groups about the evils of drugs. Somewhat to the consternation of the program leaders, Ron's exploits were perhaps more hilarious than frightening to his audiences. And his sobriety didn't last too long, with liquor and weed becoming his primary drugs of choice and habit. Back in 2014, I found out, after spending about 5 minutes with him and getting one look at the mason jars full of weed he'd grown and classified by strength, that hard partying was not just a stage persona for Ron White. Over 3 days with Ron, at his former house just down the street from Oprah's in Montecito, on board his private jet, and in his Vegas suite after a series of shows at the Mirage, I did my very best to keep my reporting wits about me, but egged on by White and his entourage, I ended up consuming a not inconsiderable amount of liquor and weed. And I distinctly remember at one point, a British illusionist showed up at his after party and whipped out a joint that was literally the size of a magic wand. Later that very same night, Ron somehow goaded me into riding a mechanical bull at a bar. I was, as you can probably guess, no Travolta-like natural on the thing. Hundreds watched as I got very prematurely ejected. I will say, Ron lasted a hell of a lot longer and did so with a full glass of scotch in one hand. This is The Originals, and I'm your host, Andrew Goldman. I spent decades interviewing celebrities for magazines, the vast majority of whom were just there to sell something and shared very little of themselves. So I created The Originals to interview cultural figures who actually had something to say, wanted to express something real. Back when I interviewed Ron White in 2014, he did have a ton to say, but he also participated because he had something to sell. Not long before, he'd started a tequila company called Number Juan. Juan is spelled J-U-A-N. It's cute, right? And as you're going to hear a little later, we were both thwarted in our respective missions. So, when I recently read Ron say in an interview that his current tour would be his last ever, I reached out and offered to try to make up for what happened 8 years ago, and promised if he and I could talk, I'd give him the floor to plug the living hell out of his tequila. So I met Ron in the same suite we'd partied in 8 years before. He'd played the late night at the Mirage the night before. The show was so funny it had me gasping for air, and I texted him immediately after the show to tell him how brilliant he'd been. My phone rang a second later. It was Ron, and he invited me to the after party at his suite, so I had a chance at one more night out in Vegas with one of the world's most preeminent party animals. All of what I've just told you was a big wind-up to make this one point. If you're a fan of this show, you'll know that I pride myself on my interview preparation. You're about to hear what it sounds like when I'm caught 100% unprepared, caught totally, entirely, embarrassingly flat-footed. Welcome to the 12th episode of our third season, produced in proud partnership with Los Angeles Magazine. Ron White, welcome to The Originals.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew Goldman.
I have so much to say to you. First thing I have to say is I have a few regrets in my life. Years ago, I said, God, I like Netflix. I should buy Netflix. It's like $7 a share.
Right.
Never fucking bought it.
Okay. And there's only two things you regret.
No. I regret a mean tweet that I sent that basically destroyed my career. That I regret. And I also regret having gotten a call from you after your show last night and you saying, we're going to be partying at the villas. You want to come by? And me kind of like sputtering a little bit. And I had this plan. I was like, if I party with Ron White tonight, the last time I saw Ron White, there was a bottle of Johnny Walker Black on the table.
All right, that's how long ago it was.
It was 4 a.m. You pointed at the thing and you said, you and I are going to drink that bottle right now. And I thought to myself, I have to be a professional. I have to interview this guy and I have a lot to say to him. If I go there, I'm not going to be able to talk to him tomorrow. I sputtered a little bit and I said, I don't know, maybe And then you said, well, meet us at the box office if you want to go. So I came over to the box office. Nobody was there. I called you didn't pick up. And you know what it was? If Ron White says to you, do you want to party? You say, fuck yes, where? Now, go. That's what it was, right? You're like, fuck this guy. If he doesn't want
anything. It was my girlfriend's birthday. We had some people over for cake. And we drank, they drank tequila. I don't drink anymore. I don't know if you know that or not, but I quit drinking 14 months ago.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I don't talk about it on stage because it's just not part of the show. But 14 months ago, doctors telling me, showing me what my life looks like now, what it's going to look like at 70 if I continue this behavior. And then I was having some problems anyway. I went to a hypnotist in Santa Monica. And then I went to Costa Rica and did ayahuasca with the shamans down there in Costa Rica at a place called Rhythmia. But between the two of them, I haven't had a drink, and it hadn't bothered me hardly at all. So now I still do edibles and smoke pot and eat an occasional.
I'm speechless. Well, the first thing you see on your stage, the lights come up on a bottle of Number One, and then I think at a certain point in the show, you take a big slug of it. Is it apple juice now?
Well, I don't take a slug out of the bottle. I drink out of a glass. But yeah, that's not apple juice. But it's not tequila. But and the reason is I quit drinking. I didn't quit selling tequila. I still own this company, and I still I need people to take my place.
Ron, you called yourself the last time we were together. I think maybe you remember the phrase, an amok-running motherfucker.
Running amok. Yeah, I'll run amok with you. Right. I'm a muck running motherfucker. Right.
Are you so? I know you had a health problem on the road. Is that right? You had something with your neck.
Yeah, that's really not related to the alcohol thing. That was just a separate incident. But I did have some alcohol related stuff going on that has since remedied itself. I don't seem to have those same numbers, and so it's all good. You look really concerned, but it's all good.
No. My only concern is this. My concern is for your health. My concern, and I'm sure you thought about this. Dean Martin supposedly never drank as much as he actually sort of suggested he drank on stage. I don't know if he ever quit, but he was an act associated with drinking.
Right.
You are an act associated with DUIs. You got some great, Tater Salad is the story about you getting thrown out of a bar
right.
for being drunk and disorderly. There's a lot of the early work that was about your adventures with alcohol.
And the later work also, and all the work in between. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's not a problem. And I probably should address it on stage. I just don't have time, to get into it. I'm winding this career down at the end of this year. And so maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. I kind of thought I would early on, and I just haven't done it. So it's just easier to do the show and keep those two separate. It's not a newscast, right? It's just a show. A lot of the stuff in the show is 100% true, and a lot of it is 100% false.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me if it's true or not. I'm just trying to get a laugh,
Okay, from last evening's show, I just thought it was brilliant. I just thought there are a few times where I've really, really laughed my head off. And I've seen everybody. Louis C.K. didn't make me laugh my head off. Very funny. Chris Rock was funny. He didn't make me laugh my head off. Chappelle, I laughed my ass off. I laughed my ass off. And I thought to myself, this guy is got to be one of the funniest people on earth. Naturally, one of the funniest people on earth.
Well, it's actually Chappelle. You were so close. It's Chappelle that's the funniest guy on earth. I did some shows with Chappelle and Rogan in Austin during the pandemic. It was an outdoor venue, and Chappelle and Rogan put on a bunch of shows, and they included me in some of them. I would talk to Chappelle, who I know, before the show, and then I would watch him do a set and think to myself, I was never that good. He is so much better than I believe anybody that does it, but certainly better than I ever was. So I am a funny guy, and I know I'm good at stand-up, and that's all I do, and it's all I've done for nearly 40 years. But there's certainly a difference. But thank you for the compliment.
I remember you and I have known each other. We knew each other for 4 days together, 8 years ago. And I think maybe one of my proudest moments was at the end of it, after you pointed at the bottle, and I said, I just can't possibly. You said that you're a good hang. You pronounced me a good hang, which to me was a huge compliment coming from you, because I assume that you don't say that to everybody.
You stayed with it. You stayed with it. I give points for that.
But what I remember about those days was raging. And I didn't see the aftermath. I knew what I felt like the morning after.
Yeah.
Did you feel similar? Were you having trouble? I drank as much as I drank with you probably twice a year. I didn't recover as well. Were you having trouble recovering from those kinds of nights?
That was pretty regular behavior for me for about 36 of the 38 years that I did stand-up comedy. So, yeah, no, but I remember we went at it pretty hard. I think we were on bulls and stuff, and I think I fell off of some shit. And
you were at a bull?
We had a.
Not only did you ride a bull, but actually after you fell off the bull, you took the mechanical bull at Gillies by the head and you rammed it into your crotch. You made the mechanical bull fillet you.
Right.
To great amusement and cheers from the audience.
Yeah, very classy act. Very classy act. There's nothing I won't do for a laugh. Nothing.
I saw the news, and you just referenced this, that you are, as of the end of 2022, retiring, which I have to imagine is just bullshit.
Right.
I was looking at the list of people. Sinatra retired in 72. He released New York, New York in 1980. Barbra Streisand retired. Phil Collins retired. He just basically retired 20 years ago and just hobbled off the stage like a few weeks ago.
Right, yeah. He's done.
How? I would imagine if you say that this is the farewell tour, it probably helps ticket sales. Are you serious about this actually, about not doing it anymore?
Yeah, I'm serious. I mean, I've done this for 38 years, and it really asks, it asks everything of you, to be a good stand-up, because you really need to be doing stand-up every night of your life to be any good at it, and which I did. I lived in L.A., so I could do 3 sets a night on the nights I wasn't doing big shows. And so I always did a lot of shows because I always assumed this was going to come to an end. And then it never did, and I was like, somebody's got to put a stop to this or it's going to go on forever. I'm 65 now, and the road is pretty rough, and especially without the big drinking party. If you take the party out of the road, you're just traveling, and then that means you're going to Wichita for fun. And sorry, Wichita, it's not that much fun to go there. I do it to perform. But I also, because I've been so busy doing stand-up, I also haven't been very present in the lives of people that I really care about. And so I would like, I'll never quit doing stand-up. I'm just going to quit touring. I'm going to quit making money at stand-up comedy and do it for free.
Yeah.
So Rogan's got a bunch of stuff going on in Austin, and I will continue to do that as long as I want to. But I'm telling you, when the pandemic hit, I didn't miss stand-up comedy one single bit. I enjoyed so much not having to do anything, and I don't do much anyway other than stand-up comedy. It's amazing how lazy I am, and I have an assistant that does every single thing I don't want to do, which leaves nothing for me to do.
Yeah.
So I like that, and that's fun. And I play a lot of golf, but to get back into stand-up after 15 months off was almost impossible.
Really?
It was so hard. And
did you develop? I did a long interview not long ago with Gilbert Gottfried, who also really makes his act. It's the same act he's been doing for 25 years, but I saw it for the first time and it's very funny.
Yeah, no,
but
Gottfried's great.
I interviewed him, and he was like, basically every time he does a stand-up act, he's praying to God that the venue burns down so he doesn't have to do it. Experiences like great. Were you experiencing any anxiety about going back?
Oh, well, completely, because all the things that I was so good at, I was good at because I did it every day. So for me to take 15 months off, there was nothing there. And the biggest thing that was missing was all that confidence, because I always looked at it as I knew exactly what this crowd wants. They paid to see me. Mm-hmm. I do all the work I can possibly do to be ready for that show. And so it's going to be fun. I'm going to go give it to them, and it's going to be glorious. And and so that changes from not knowing the show. My memory's not as good as it used to be at 65. The pace, rhythm, timing, and it just took a while to get it back. And I did, but it was harder than I thought it would be. I thought I'd just listen to it 2 or 3 times and go back. But I sounded like I was doing an impression of myself. And it was just irritating. And I couldn't quit for a while. It made me anxious to go on stage because I didn't know what was going to happen. Then one day it just kind of clicked again. And then I got out there, and now I like it again. I mean, it's fun to go on stage. The crowds are so generous with me, and my fans. I mean, we've sold almost every ticket we've put on sale. My fans seem to. I mean, it seems like the response to me just walking on stage is bigger than anything that I'd ever experienced before the pandemic. It seems like that all increased. And I can't for the life of me explain it, but, I'm going on stage to standing ovations in some cities, at the Fox in Atlanta. It almost made me cry, just the attention they gave and the applause just to see me again, after the pandemic. I guess they missed me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If a human life could have a Big Bang event, one decision that changes everything. Showing up one night in 1986 to do his first ever open mic night at Arlington, Texas's Funny Bone would be Ron White's. At that point in his history, he was selling windows from the back of his pickup truck. Here's how he wrote about it in his memoir. If I was across from you, I could sell you windows, but you usually have to come find me in a titty bar. That night, Jeff Foxworthy, who just happened to be headlining, watched Ron's set, took him aside, and told him he needed to make comedy his living. Then Foxworthy took him under his wing, made him his regular opener, and 14 years later included him in his Blue Collar Comedy Tour and mega hit DVD of the same name. A few years after that, Ron's association with Blue Collar exploded spectacularly after Ron had a fight with Foxworthy's manager, who had organized the whole tour. Foxworthy told me this about Ron. I learned many years ago you can't tell Ron to do anything. But Foxworthy also said this. Out of the four of us on the Blue Collar Tour, Ron was the most naturally funny. He's probably the funniest person I've ever met. He could recap his day and you'd be beating the table laughing. Foxworthy's influence actually didn't end there. Ron would eventually meet, fall head over heels in love with, and marry Foxworthy's decorator, Barbara, who became his second wife. But also that night at the Funny Bone, Ron made friends with the guy at the bar who served him his Budweiser. The guy's name was Alex Raymundo, and he would eventually become Ron's longtime opener, as well as his partner in the tequila company. Oh, and Alex had a pretty sister, a jazz singer named Margot Ray. Now get this. Ron divorced Foxworthy's decorator, and following a period of time sneaking around behind his buddy Alex's back, made it official and married Margot, to whom he was married when I met him 8 years ago. So, you recall at the start of the show, I said I wrote a profile of Ron for Men's Journal. Well, I did write a profile. It's just it never saw the light of day. In journalism parlance, it got killed, which sucked, of course, but it happens occasionally. When I think about writing that story, I do remember struggling with how to deal with his partying. Was this behavior worth celebrating? My story was basically very funny comedian who jokes about drinking too much, probably drinks too much. But now someone has a real opportunity to write a truly great Ron White profile. What happens when a comedian who built an entire act about drinking too much and became a hero and huge box office draw for middle-aged hard partiers quits drinking? Well, we met 7 years ago because I had pitched a story to Men's Journal because I saw your comedy, and I hate to put it like this, but I mean, I think that I am a certain type. I don't want to call myself an East Coast elite, but I've always lived on the East Coast. I thought that there were certain comedians who were considered like the genius comedians, and and then I found you, and I saw obviously I saw the Blue Collar Tour, but then I started looking at your comedy, and I was like, this guy is like really, really good, and nobody on this coast talks about. They don't put him in the same category as they do Dave Chappelle. And so when I pitched Men's Journal, that was the idea, that this is like a fucking thoroughbred who is out there that for some reason on the East Coast, nobody's talking about him. I mean, you feel like the media kind of overlooked you a bit.
No.
No?
No, listen, I understand what you're saying, and it's true. It's totally true. My fame comes from nothing but stand-up comedy. It doesn't come from a big hit television show. It doesn't come from being a movie star. And so I'm just not as famous as those guys. Now, I might sell more tickets, and I do sell more tickets than almost every comedian alive.
Yeah.
Over the last 20 years, probably, if you don't have a puppet in your hands, it's probably me because I worked so hard, or maybe Iglesias, but we would be 1 and 2. So, but because the fame didn't come from TV, way more people have no idea who I am. And so the East Coast elite might be a big batch of those. But the people who were caught by the spread of this grassroots movement became true fans and loyal fans. But I can still go out and do things without people pestering me to death, like Rock or Chappelle, or any number of comics, whose real fame came from television.
Yeah. I wanted to write a story about you because I didn't feel like you got your due. And ultimately, why I asked you to do this is that I wanted to talk to you because they killed the story, and I wanted to find out why they killed the fucking story. And it felt like a real failure to me because you were so generous with your time, and you did nothing wrong, and you spent a lot of time with me. And then I passed in this article, and for whatever reason, they didn't publish it. So I was going to get the editor on the phone. He didn't seem to want to do it. I called him to find out what the deal was, why the thing, because I never got actually a satisfactory answer. I assumed it was my handiwork. And I'm still going to assume that if my story, that I failed somewhat, if my story had been the best story ever written, they probably would have published it. But he did say, because it was Men's Journal, it was owned by Jan Wenner, and I found, let me find what he told me. The story of why it was killed is an unremarkable one, and I'm not sure I have any memory of why, apart from Jan Wenner having narrow ideas of celebrity and relevance, and who is or isn't deserving of his precious pages. And I felt like that basically sort of justified my pitch, which is that this person is being ignored unjustifiably by East Coast and West Coast elites.
Right.
So I feel like we got fucked. I feel like if my story had been better, it would have gone in. But I owe you an apology, and
Well,
I want to make amends.
Well, let me assure you one thing. I got everywhere I got in life without Men's Journal. Media it doesn't matter to me. Now, here's what happened. I got lucky, and I got famous off of very little material. Blue Collar One was enough to make me famous. So, and I only did 10 minutes. And so this is the perfect storm, right? You're doing a short set, and you're not going to burn an hour of material getting famous like most people do. So I've been doing stand-up at 15 years at the time, and I've got a long set that's flawless, which will be the next album, and nobody's ever heard a word of it. So once a comedy career catches, you just if you're selling out theaters, it is, it's profitable. Then the DVD sold 4 million copies. And all of a sudden, I can sell out any venue in the country.
Why did that happen?
2 minutes.
Why did it become like such a huge seller?
Because it tested off the hook. People just loved it. Middle America, not East Coast elite, middle America fell in love. Blue collar people just fell in love with this movie. And they bought it and like hotcakes. I couldn't go into a Walmart. I was, I'm so much less famous than I was when that came out because it was at the forefront of so many people. Because if you got a really hot comedy DVD, that's something you really share with a lot of people. I did it with Steve Martin's Let's Get Small. I had it in my pocket,
right,
in a cassette. I'd play it for anybody that would sit still long enough for me to let them listen to it. So anyway, I started making a bunch of money. So people ask me that all the time, why didn't you have a really shitty sitcom? Well, because I didn't want one and I didn't have to have it. So I was okay with just being a comedian. Yeah. And that's enough. That's plenty good. Yeah. And so I've never done I never had to, blow the guys in Hollywood.
Yeah. I remember for the story, calling up Jeff Foxworthy, and he said that you were the funniest person he'd ever met in his life. Has he told you that before?
Not to my face.
Well, he told me that.
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
We're at the Montreal Comedy Festival. All of us are there. And it's right before we shoot, the week before we shoot, Blue Collar One.
Yeah.
And when you do the gala, which we all did on different nights, they review it in 10 categories. 3 people review it in 10 categories. Best comic, worst comic, best joke, worst joke, all these things. And so you want to be in that in a positive light. You want to get mentioned, and it's a lot of comedians. So I woke up the next morning, and actually they woke me up, and I got all over it. And this one guy, I can't remember his name, wrote, Ron White, sheer genius. That was the review. And I was like, as soon as I read it, it made me sick to my stomach because I knew I'd spend the next 6 months of my life with Foxworthy going, well, we would have been here on time, but sheer genius locked his keys in his room, which is exactly what happened. So,
even from the very beginning, you were seen as the kind of on blue collar. You were the one with the conspicuous consumption. You had the cigar. You had the great scotch. You looked like a man who was living well. And I remember talking to Foxworthy, and you talked to me a little bit about this. They felt like Foxworthy, at least at that point, said, you're distancing yourself from the audience. And this sounds like stuff that you had debates with him about because and that's what I loved about you, is you came on stage and you talked about the plane that you'd always say, the plane that you guys bought.
We always disagreed on that. Jeff and I did.
Did you see where he was coming from?
I could always see Jeff's perspective because he's smarter than I am, and so I listened to him a lot. But he always said, that don't talk about the money. But I always saw it as people were rooting for me anyway, and they didn't care that I made the money. So, and I think the fans, they could do the math. They're sitting in that theater. They can figure out how much how profitable it is. And it got to where for me to get to all these dates I was doing, I was having to rent planes, and that's expensive. And it's way cheaper if you're doing a lot of stuff to buy a reasonable price plane and go have somebody fly around to do them. And,
having spent time with you, I don't think I've seen anybody who lives as well as you live. I mean, I don't think many people actually own their own jets. Do you still have that jet?
You know what? Oddly enough, I sold it 2 days ago.
You did?
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to my bankers about retirement. They said I could keep it, but I couldn't fly it. And I'm like, well, then what's the point of that? That's no fun. So I just sold it. But I had it for 15 years, and it was great. And I don't know of any other comic that bought one. But they all
that's
the big comics
that's what you hear
they rent them.
About jets is, I mean, it's not even that much to buy it, but maintaining
it's crazy.
What does it cost?
If I knew more about what it cost, I probably would have thrown it away years ago.
But from what I've seen, it looks like a lifestyle that would be hard for you to retire. I felt like you were joking back then that you were doing all these dates because you had a lot of bills. You had a house in Montecito then. You subsequently built a custom house in Beverly Hills. You had a place in Atlanta. It looked to me like an incredibly big nut.
It is.
Yeah.
Or it was. But, it's also the trap of fame and fortune is a tricky dance. And it was tricky for me. It's just all of a sudden I could have anything, and so I wanted everything. And I thought of it, I drank like an idiot. I chased women like an idiot. I mean, just every single trap you could possibly step in, I stepped in it. And it's tricky. And I'm glad that I came out the other side a fairly, reasonable person. But it kills a lot of people, that fame and that fortune does. Yeah. And the power that comes with it, whenever the Will Smith thing came down, I remember a specific moment in my life that I did something so arrogant and said something so ridiculous that to this day, when I think back on that, it makes me sick to my stomach because of just how stupid I was to do whatever it was I did. And
you're not going to tell me what it is, are you?
Oh, it's so bad. Well,
Yeah, please.
We won't tell anybody. Just between you and I.
It'll be cleansing. What'd you do?
No, I'm not going to.
All right.
But it was just ego and arrogance. And when I look back on it to see just how dumb I was those few short years ago, and then think about how dumb am I now? And when I look back 5 years from now, I look back on today's me. But I think I can see some progress. I really do. I think
a lot has changed since I saw you 7 years ago. 7 years ago, you were married to the singer, Margot Ray.
Right.
You're very much in love. You're now divorced. I read a lot of shit. It sounded like it was not amicable.
Not really. No,
Yeah.
Not really. And you know what? The bottom line is that she was living with a drunk. And that can't be fun for anybody, And I think that was probably more than anything else the source of the trouble.
Really?
Because it was my drinking was just so out of hand.
In the 8 years that have passed since I met Ron, I might have missed the news about him quitting drinking, but I'd heard a lot of other stuff. I knew Ron had sold the Beverly Hills house he built with Margot and moved to Austin. And back in 2016, I'd seen Ron's big break on Prestige TV come and go. Ron was cast on Cameron Crowe's Showtime series Roadies, but the show only lasted a single season. I'd heard about the death of a particularly sweet guy in his orbit I'd met, Steve Cook, his best friend and road manager. And beginning in 2017, TMZ began covering a lot of the uglier parts of his divorce proceedings with Margot. I honestly can't say I was surprised they split. When I spoke with her for the story, Margot already seemed like she was close to a breaking point. This is what she told me. Drinking is one thing, but to get plowed regularly is another. And Ron said he knows he can't drag these habits into his 60s. I'm not an enabler, but I can't love him enough to where he'll stop. For a while, Ron would do this extended bit in his act about his unlikely friendship with Dr. Phil. It's a story about how he and Margot visited Phil and his family who were vacationing on this super yacht in Monaco. The story goes, Ron gets hammered, offends all of Dr. Phil's guests with a joke that begins, "The other day I was tit-fucking Mimi Eisenhower," and then proceeds to fall off the gangplank and injure himself really badly while his horrified wife is trying to escort him off. I'm going to post a link to the bit in the show notes. It's pretty much the most horrifying story you can imagine, but in Ron's hands, absolutely hilarious. That is, if you don't think too hard about what kind of toll this event could take on a marriage. If there can be one bright spot about the Margot news, the other topic that's long been a fixture of his act other than drinking has been divorce. I want to play you a bit from his 2018 Netflix special, If You Quit Listening, I'll Shut Up, about his ex-wife Barbara's divorce lawyer. Now, this is a joke that's going to come up in a few minutes.
When I get back to the States, my assistant goes, Ron, did you hear that John Mayhew died? And I'm like, John Mayhew, why do I know that name? It's your ex-wife's divorce lawyer. Oh, I hated that motherfucker. That Yale snob fucking piece of shit fucked me out of so goddamn much money. And it happened 10 years before, but I still had his office number in my phone, and my wife said I was a dick for doing this. But as soon as I found out he died, I called his office. I said, I'd like to speak to John Mayhew, please. And the lady goes, well, I'm very sorry to tell you, but Mr. Mayhew passed away. And I said, okay. And I call her right back. I said, I'd like to speak to John Mayhew, please. She goes, I just told you Mr. Mayhew passed away. I said, I know, I just like hearing you say it. My wife's like, you're a dick. I'm like, bullshit. He's like, yeah, I don't know where he's buried. I'll show you, dick.
One of the signature pieces was an amazing story you told about going to Dr. Phil's yacht with Margot. And I talked to Margot about it, and I talked to Phil, and I couldn't, after watching your comedy, I mean, you kind of have to be like, that can't possibly be true. That can't possibly be true what happened. Like, he's in front of, like, all these sort of dandies on a yacht singing about maybe Eisenhower sucking your dick or
something. Well, not that exactly, but yeah.
And I was like, that couldn't possibly have happened. And then you fall off the yacht and face plant and you're bloody. And I'm like, this couldn't possibly happen. And I talked to Dr. Phil and he was like, it was actually a lot worse than that. It was actually worse.
I did clean the story up a little bit for stage. Yeah,
And then Margot said it was worse too. She said that she had to pop your arm back in and get you a croque monsieur, like you were drunk and unruly and bloody, and all you needed was a croque monsieur.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bad night. It was just one of those that didn't turn out as I had planned. But out of it, I got one of the best stories I've ever told on stage, and so. But you can't just keep living your life that way, right? Just for the stories, so you'll have something to talk about when you get on stage? I don't think you can.
No, I don't think you can either.
Yeah.
You did have a good unalcoholic, and this is going to be one of my fact-checking stories. Did you, in fact, recently, you said on stage last night that you recently swallowed like a $2,000 crown, and you basically had to wait to shit it out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
How did that work? Seriously? I mean, is this something you can find out about on the internet? Do people do this?
Google it. Yeah, people swallow crowns all the time, and they got to get them back because they're so expensive, And I was on the other side of the country. So, yeah, I took a bunch of laxative and waited it out, crapped in a strainer.
You do have an assistant. Is this something that the assistant, can you call in the assistant? I mean, does being rich and famous help you with something like this?
You got to draw the line somewhere or it's going to come back to haunt you in the media. So you don't have the assistant hold the strainer under your ass while you're trying to shit a tooth.
And does it fit right back immediately in?
Oh, yeah, it came out of there. It went right back on. What I did was I rinsed it off and then I put a piece of toilet paper over the tooth. And then I crammed it on there, and I used the toilet paper just to help wedge it on there. And then I cleaned the rest of the toilet paper off with my thumbnail and went on stage. Let's go.
Another fact check question. Did you actually have a disagreement with your neighbor in Los Angeles that involved a newspaper?
Yes, I did.
Now, I can't tell the joke, but what I gleaned last night from the joke was that this woman, your next door neighbor, came over indignant about you stealing the newspaper, and you told her to go fuck herself, and you would never do anything like that. And then she produced video of you actually going into her driveway and taking her newspaper. Is that kind of how it went down?
That's how part of it went down, yeah. I don't even remember why I stole their newspaper, but I thought probably that they didn't need it because it was laying in the driveway, and I don't remember why I needed it, but then she accused me of it. I said no, and then they were able to email me the footage from their security camera. And I don't even know how they did that, but I'm like, yeah, that looks like me. And but
Can you make up stories about being drunk? You can't, right? I mean, that whole genre has got to be like sort of done.
well, you gotta, the story's got to start somewhere, right? Now, if I can find a way to lie to make it funnier, I will. And then some of it just works better because of the ring of truth, you know, and that it wouldn't have if I made it up. I guess I could sit around and make up shit, but I'm just not that good a writer.
Yeah. Do you think? Did your brush with these health issues? Do you think about mortality? Is this something you think about? I've started thinking. I'm about.
It's more the comics dying on the road. I just don't want to die on the road. I probably will anyway, but it's just I've had enough of the life, and I have enough money to retire comfortably, and so I want to do other things that I haven't been doing. For 38 years, if something was happening on Friday or Saturday night, I couldn't go. And most Tuesdays and Wednesdays we're doing stuff in Austin, and then Rogan's Club's going to open at the end of the summer, and so we'll always have a nice little base of rooms to do stand-up in.
What's that scene in Austin like? I assumed when you said Rogan's there, Tom Segura's there, Bert Kreischer's there, I assumed until I sat down that you guys were just going crazy. But maybe you're like in terms of
they're going crazy.
They're going crazy.
Yeah, they're going crazy. I've just, I still smoke pot, so I go down there and drink. I have this marijuana powder stuff called Purejuana that now I'm giving them a commercial. But it's a powder, like a BC powder kind of a thing. You just pour it into a little fruit juice mix, and then you drink again. Yeah, it's far from being sober. Yeah, that's why I usually just say I quit drinking. I don't say I'm sober.
Well, this might be the moment. You were somebody who was very generous with your time, but you also had a product to sell, and I felt very guilty about it not happening. And you gave me, while we were together, the anejo, the number one anejo.
The extra añejo.
Extra anejo.
Añejo.
Añejo.
Yeah, extra añejo.
Añejo. And this was probably the best tequila I'd ever had in my life.
Yeah, it is.
So I felt bad that there wasn't a small advertising opportunity. So I have offered you, would you like to do a live commercial?
Yeah, sure.
Will you tell me about number one?
Well, my traveling compadre for the bigger part of the 38 years has been a comic named Alex Raimundo, who is part of the Latin Kings of Comedy with George Lopez and Paul Rodriguez and some other guys. And we had gone down, and I was a scotch drinker, he was a tequila drinker, and we'd gone down to Mexico, and a friend of his, cousin, I don't know, he's born in Mexico, said, well, when you go down there, go to the Revesca's distillery. It's real dump, but they're making the best tequila in town. And so we went down there, and it was like nearly dead dogs laying around and fat people in dirty shirts, and the glasses were filthy. Sorry, guys, but it was. But it was clearly the best drink of liquor I'd ever had in my life. And so I bought the company. So Alex and I brought it back to the United States, and we've had a blast with it for a year. We entered the 6 biggest competitions that they have in tequila in America, including the Mexican Spirits in San Diego, which is by far the biggest. And we won 2 bronze medals, 2 silver medals, and 16 gold medals. And the tequila's available, I think, in 28 or 29 states now. It's growing. It's a genuine small batch, rare tequila. The extra añejo is so much cheaper than the big boys can make it as good as I do. All you have to do is take a lot of time, 7 years on the plants, and then really have to know what the distillery is doing, and it's expensive to make. Yeah. And they have to sell that, their regular extra añejo, they'll sell that for $400 or $500 a bottle, and mine's just a little over $100. And the reason is they have $1 billion advertising budget, and we have me going, hey, I got some tequila for sale over here if y'all want some. And we pass the savings on to you. So you can go to taterstequila.com and try this tequila. It'll change the way you think about tequila.
I've been wondering about the meaning of life. Do you think I can find it if I do? I've never done ayahuasca. Have you done the toad?
No.
You haven't done the toad? Well, tell me, do you throw up after ayahuasca? Is that right?
Well, if you're really unlucky like I was, you get the shits. So, and most people are throwing up in these buckets, but you might get the diarrhea. So then you have to actually get out of this bed that you're on and go to a bathroom instead of puking in a bucket. So I never thought I'd ever see a room full of people puking in a bucket and go, lucky. I wish I could just lay there and throw up.
Do you get to choose who you do ayahuasca with?
I went to Costa Rica and went to a place called Rhythmia but yeah, you get to choose who you do it with. I mean, everybody that's there does it in this big room. And there's like, in our case, we were like 50 people, and there's 50 mattresses on the floor, and it's with sheets and pillowcases and blankets, and then when you did the ayahuasca, you couldn't talk to anybody. You just had to have your own experience. And
that was a rule.
My favorite rule was don't come tell me about what's going on with you.
Because this is my fear, is that I would go to one of these places and be glommed onto by the person that you never like anybody when you go on vacation, strangers.
I went by myself, so I didn't know anybody there. And I just loved the fact that while you were under the influence of this drug, the rule was don't talk to anybody else because you'll get in the way of what they're there to do. So it was, you could openly get as fucked up as you wanted to, and that particular drug is over quick, so you don't stay high for hours and hours like acid. But I got a lot out of it, and I kind of walked away with a different perspective of finding it easier to forgive, myself and others and everybody except one divorce lawyer. And I can't forgive that motherfucker, but everybody else is good.
Yeah, what's that guy's name he used in the act?
Yeah, it was for a while. I don't want to bring it up.
You're not using it. You just brought it up.
Yeah, right. I don't want to bring his name up.
Okay. Well, you mentioned somebody in the act. It might be a pseudonym, but it is a divorce lawyer. This was, I assume, when you were married. You were married to Barbara, who was.
That was another divorce lawyer.
Oh, there was a different divorce lawyer.
Oh, yeah. He's dead. This other guy's not dead.
Oh,
I forgive the dead guy.
Oh, you forgive the dead guy?
I forgive the dead guy.
Because you have. Okay, there's a fantastic joke. Oh, so it's the most recent divorce lawyer,
right?
And so you've managed to forgive everybody except. Why do you hate him so much? Isn't he just doing his job? Don't you just have to be a prick if you're a divorce lawyer?
He was my divorce lawyer, not
your
hers.
Divorce. What?
Yeah.
What did your divorce lawyer do?
I kind of liked her divorce lawyer. She beat him. I hated him anyway. And if I'd have watched how good a job she did to beat him, I would have been applauding her. Except for she was beating me, and he was just awful. It was just awful.
He was just inept.
Horrible attorney. Horrible.
Yeah. I mean, I saw all the press accounts. I mean, she asked for $84,000 initially in spousal support.
A month.
A month. Yeah. Which sounds like that's, to me, that seems like quite a bit of money.
It did to me too. So that was like I said, I'd rather talk about something else.
Okay. That was, I looked at that number and I gulped. And, I told my wife that I was coming to see you and that you were talking about retiring. And she was like, do you think it's possible he's retiring because he doesn't want to pay, like, spousal support? Like, he just gets sick?
I don't think you get to do that.
You don't?
I think if you decide to quit making money, you have to pay it anyway.
You do?
Yeah, no, I don't have spousal support for anybody. I mean, they're all settled. So it's kind of funny because my first wife, who I'm still ridiculously close to, the mother of my son, I was married to her for 12 years, and she had my son, and she got a dryer when we got a divorce, and the other two were not in my life near that much, and they got buckets and buckets and buckets of money. You got to be
your wife before
fame and fortune. It's that same trap.
I have to say, you seem different from 7 years ago. I don't know. You seem more relaxed.
Yeah.
You seem, I don't know. There's just, and I'm wondering, was it the ayahuasca? Was it the booze? Was it? Do you think what is different?
I've genuinely mellowed out, and I think maybe the change in perspective maybe came some of it from ayahuasca, some of it from getting older, some of it from watching friends die. which has been hard. And
We're talking about comics dying on the road. Were you talking about somebody specifically?
well, two of my best friends have passed. Not that recently, but it still had more of an impact on me than I thought. And one guy was this guy named Steve Cook, who was my road manager.
You reached out to me actually when Steve died.
Huh?
I was surprised. You reached out to me when Steve was sick, and I think you reached out to me. I think you
Okay.
texted me and said Steve died, and I was surprised you reached out to me. It seemed like you were really torn up. He was somebody who you'd known since
Since I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was murder. I didn't even know. I didn't. We tried to work it through.
You didn't know?
Huh?
You didn't know he was sick?
No, I knew he was sick. I just didn't understand the impact it was going to have on my life when I lost him, because we spent every day together. He was my road manager for the last 12 years of his life, and so it's. But while we were trying to find treatment for this cancer, which we left no stone unturned, and but it didn't affect me until the real weirdest thing. Cameron Crowe wanted me to go audition for the role in Roadies, and I was at Steve's hospital room, and I hadn't cried. It hadn't bothered me. I'd never quit working on this, trying to find a solution to keep him going. And so I said, and I was going to play a road manager. I did play a road manager in this show. So it was, and Steve said, well, what are you going to be playing? I had explained it to him. I said, I'm going to be playing you in this one. And he goes, go get him. So he was already cut up, from trying to cut the cancer out of him. He was a mess.
It was brain cancer?
It was. So I went out of Cameron Crowe's office, and he explained the role of the part, and I just started sobbing. I've never cried so hard in my life, and I could not quit. And I don't know what triggered it, but it was a time that I would rather not have been sobbing. I mean, with the casting director and Cameron Crowe, and I just cannot get it out. And can't stop. I can't catch my breath. And I got up and left. And I was walking away going, well, that's probably not what they were looking for. But it turned out that he liked the fact that I was vulnerable enough to cry in front of him. So if you ever go back and watch some of those sets, the 8th show was almost all me, and it was me on a tour bus telling stories, which I've done for a long time. And I was telling the story because my character was a road manager or roadie of some kind for Leonard Skinner. And so he saw that I could do that, that I'm not afraid to cry in front of a camera, or that I'm. Well, he said it's just vulnerability.
Yeah. Nobody tells stories like you. I was thinking about your appeal the other day, and I was thinking, I know that you were selling windows and somebody said you're funny, but I just sort of imagined that you were a guy who smoked a lot of weed. And there's always a guy, they're never quite as funny as you, but there's always a guy who, when you're smoking weed, you're like, that is the funniest motherfucker I've ever seen. I mean, did your feelings about comedy come out of sort of shooting the shit and smoking weed?
I think it goes back deeper than that, longer ago than that. I was a fan of comedy. We had a comedy record called What It Was Football, and it was by Andy Griffith. And I listened to it over and over and over and over, because I love to listen to people laugh. And then my uncle, Dr. Charles Pollard, is a preacher, and I lived with them a lot, so I watched him preach a lot. So
I was looking up Pollard, actually, because I looked in the notes from that, and he there was a book written about him. It said he was one of the first television preachers was it in Arizona?
Yeah, he did. Was a television preacher. He works. He has a church on an Indian reservation in New Mexico, and not a casino, but this little bitty, very, very poor tribe. And he's got 35 people that go to his church, and he's cool with being the guy. He's brilliant.
I remember you told me rhythmically, people have told you that your style,
I sound like him,
mimics him, or sounds like him a lot.
Yeah, I've been told that by relatives, that watched him preach a lot and watched me on stage.
It's so interesting. I mean, I was thinking about back to like Kinnison. Kinnison had like these preaching roots, and then you think back to
So does Chris Rock. Chris Rock's dad or uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty common. You got to learn it somewhere, and it's being an orator. It's public speaking, and some people are good at it, some people aren't. But I'm sure I learned it all from him, and he was funny too. And I still talk to him all the time. He's great. He cracks me up and eggs me on. And
every stand-up comedian is asked about, like, are you concerned that somebody's going to come up and slap your face now?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I hit back. If you do, be ready. And then I pay somebody to hit too. So there's a bodyguard over there, and I also pay a cop to be with me. So
that was the damnedest thing, wasn't it?
I couldn't believe it.
That was.
I consider it to be a character reveal party. My question for him would be, who the fuck do you think you are? Because I'd like to know. I would really like to hear out of your mouth where you came up with, and it was actually
an instrument of God, didn't he say? He's an instrument of God in some way. He feels like he's an instrument of God.
I don't know. I mean, literally, when I talked a little bit earlier about the mistake that I made that I feel guilty about, it was nothing like that. I mean, it wasn't anywhere on the scale of what Will Smith did to Chris Rock on the Oscars.
Well, he slapped somebody, but do you mean like slap somebody in front of like billions?
And then said, keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth twice.
Yeah.
There was a guy that came over the house, over here last night, that I'd known from Rhythmia, who just happened to be here. He came over, and I guess he's a conspiracy theory guy, and he was telling me that was all setup. That was all setup, man. It was because Pfizer, they were advertising that night. They were coming out.
I've heard. Wait, you heard this as well? I heard this from somebody. They said Pfizer has an alopecia drug. Was that what he told you?
I'm sure it's what they've stirred up somewhere over on Newsmax, and that's what he said. And
what'd you say to him?
I said, okay, let me get this straight, dumbass. You think Pfizer paid Will Smith to ruin his career? What do you think that cost? So Pfizer said, Will, here's what we want you to do. At the right moment, walk up and slap Chris Rock in the face and then go say, keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth, but say it twice, really loud, so everybody can hear you. And that's going to help us sell some hair care stuff.
So it would have to involve Chris Rock, because he would have to make the alopecia joke. And then, so they're all conspiring.
He didn't make an alopecia joke. He made a shaved head joke that had nothing to do. And quite frankly, she doesn't really look like she has it, because I've seen some pictures of people that do, and their scalp is all spotty and stuff, and hers look perfect to me. So I don't know, Jada. But anyway, I can't imagine a less appropriate thing. And then besides, it was an all-black production, and people that had worked their lives to win these awards, ever how silly they may be. But Will Smith is a joke now. He turned himself into a joke. If last night I wanted to pick the low-hanging fruit, I could have just on stage said Will Smith, and everybody would have laughed. Yeah. And so he's a meme and a punchline, and it doesn't matter what else he's done in his career. When you say the word Will Smith, nobody thinks about any of those things. They don't think about anything but that slap and that ridiculous thing that he said, and how they didn't know Will Smith like they thought they did. Well, we didn't know him at all. But he did a pretty good job of convincing us that he wasn't the person that he is. And right now, of course, him saying, hey, I'm sorry. Yeah, you burned somebody's toast at breakfast, you're sorry.
Yeah.
You do this, sorry's not going to help you one single bit. And for him to resign from the Academy so they couldn't kick him out, that was just chicken shit.
I laughed so hard last night, and one of the things I was thinking about afterwards is if I could make people do that, I would never be able to stop doing that. Like you... I I don't imagine sort of sitting around. Do you get the same thrill at a dinner party if you tell a story and people laugh that you do when you're in a theater of thousands?
I don't even know if I get a thrill, I love walking on stage. I love the love that they have for me, one of my favorite things about my career is that I have the respect of my peers, the Chappelles and the Rocks and those guys know who I am and they like what I do and they include me in things, if they come to town. That's really cool. Chris Rock has said some really nice things about me in print and that really matters to me a lot, and I feel like I'm a part of that very small subculture of theater acts and in stand-up comedy and those people have chosen the same path I have in doing stand-up comedy and it feels good to be respected by them more than anything else.
I'm glad you're on this path. I never drank as much as you did, but I can't imagine, though, not ever doing it again.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I didn't think I could quit, and I just did, and it's just not that big a deal, and it makes so much sense in so many areas for me to not drink. And, part of it was also my girlfriend has a place down in Oxnard. It's on her place is on the main channel of this big marina. So the people around us that lived around us are our age or older, and they all drank like me. And I would look at them and go, wow, that looks like it's not good for you at all. And then I started turning that inside and go, I don't want to, that's not where I want to be. In 5 years, I'm going to be 70. I'd like to be able to still get around and play golf and have a good time. And I'm not headed that way. And
there were no ultimatums involved. This is something you decided to do.
No, people have tried the ultimatums. That didn't work at all. I decided that I wanted to quit and that I wanted to do things a little differently for the last phase of my life, and I'm proud of myself for doing it. I came up with a plan, and I stuck with it, and I don't miss it at all. Mm-hmm. It's I still have a good time, and I still, I still get my buzz on, and liquor wasn't working for me anymore.
I have number one at the table here in Vegas. I have Ron White. I want to say goodbye to number one. I'm going to thank Ron White. Ron.
Andrew Goldman, thank you. We finally got to do something and get something out there.
Yeah, we did. I'm sorry it took 7 years. I apologize. I was actually, one of my ideas was I'm going to let you be as sadistic as you want. You can make me drink as much as you want. I will drink that whole bottle of number one, a Black Label, but I guess we'll have to do it in the afterlife.
Okay, buddy. Let's do that.
Okay.
All right,
Ron,
man. Take care.
That's our show. If you liked it, please subscribe, rate, leave us a great review, and tell 16 of your comedy-loving friends about us. This episode was produced by myself and Rob Heath, a man banned for life from Rhythmia for giving wet willies to everyone in his ayahuasca group. I want to offer special thanks to Ron White, a guy who's obviously embarked on what could be seen as the path of most resistance, but he's made a worthy, obviously very scary decision and deserves to be supported and congratulated. You might have noticed a Gilbert Gottfried reference in the interview. Gilbert died 2 days after this interview was recorded, and Gilbert, like Ron, was another of that very small handful of comedians whose live performance made me laugh uncontrollably. So when I first heard the news about Gilbert, my overwhelming feeling was gratitude that I'd been lucky enough to see him live. I think Ron probably has decades left on Earth, but it's best to see a master at work while you have the opportunity. His farewell tour goes through Christmas. Trust me, see him. You'll be able to tell your grandchildren that you saw the legend. Tour dates can be found at tatersalad.com. Thanks also to the entire crack team at Los Angeles Magazine, notably Joseph Kapsch, Andrew Curry, as well as Silver Fox editor Mayor Rashawn. The Originals is, as always, a highly replaceable production.